time, I won't say too much, but again, it is good to see everybody in person after a long several years. Back in 2014, we were trying to figure out a way to build some capacity to address some of the invasive species issues in the Southeast, which are numerous. And so we started what we call our small grants program. And Cindy's got a really great presentation kind of on with some of the numbers, some of the funding, some of the projects we funded over the years. And as Dave said, it's been a great partnership. And I always have to make sure I tell James how much I appreciate his work on it. And I'll just pass it over to Cindy. So thank you, Darren.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. I've been working with James quite a while, and so this is my first actual commission meeting. We spent a lot of time in the GSARP, which is Gulf and South Atlantic Regional Panel of the Aquatic Invasive Species Task Force. GSARP is much easier. So I tried to I'll just give you a quick rundown about what we've been doing since 2014. Okay. Oh, the big one. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so as Allan said, we started in 2014 with a couple $100,000 that we put into a 5-year grant to try to get funding to other entities to help us do aquatic invasive species research, management, control, what have you. The way the funding comes down to the Fish and Wildlife Service, there's designated funds that go specifically to the states that have approved aquatic nuisance species management plans, and then the rest comes to the agency to do the work. We have not had the capacity, and we still don't have the capacity to do everything that needs to be done to address all of the different issues that are facing us. And so we have we created the small grants program to reach out and to get others. And you're going to hear several other presentations that will go on later on. So before I came on to this role, the RFP that James would put out, we would get many criteria, many proposals, and we had a difficult time answering questions about, well, why didn't my project get funded? So when the Fish and Aquatic Conservation Program's strategic plan was put together, we added the goals and objectives for aquatic nuisance species into the criteria. And so that's how we have rated and evaluated the proposals, and that's how we make the funding decisions at this point. And so the objectives for the goal for in the strategic plan are prevent introduction, implement a national EDRR, early detection rapid response. We're still working on that. Work collaboratively with our partners, which is everybody in here, and then manage the established populations for suppression. The way the process works is James posts an RFP. They're submitted to him. There's a panel that gets formed, and then the panel ranks everything based on the criteria of the objectives, and those scores are rated. And so this is, can't really see that very well, but the boxes at the top are, that's a snip of the score sheet, so they're just numbered. And then the criteria is weighted. So what is the significance? Is the technical merit? All these things have different points on there. Is it feasible to do within the 2-year time period? It used to be 1 year, now it's 2 years. And then the budget, and what is going to be the impact of the work that is done? Is it going to move the needle, if you will? And so then each project is ranked and scored, and then starting from 1 down to however, we award the funding based on what we have available. So when we run out of money, we stop. So the little caveat, so most of the funding goes to universities and others that are doing research, but USGS has been a very strong ally and a partner, and Gulf states can't administer federal funds back to a different federal agency. So for those projects that USGS submits to us that get ranked highly, we do a cooperative agreement with USGS to fund those projects. And we've amended those over the last several years. So, and then some of the work that GS has done with us has been working with their aquatic nuisance species database. They've done some risk mapping. They've integrated some eDNA, a bunch of other stuff. You'll hear about that later. So between 2014 and 2018, we spent $659,000, almost $660,000 of federal fish and wildlife funds to implement these programs, all these different projects. We have a 5-year grant program, and so in 2019 we issued a new 5-year grant. The money is trickling in slowly, so it's based on available federal funds that we can put toward this effort. And so we've had 3 cooperative agreements with USGS. It was about $127,000. And since 2014, we've awarded 43 projects, which includes the 3 from GS, and we've spent over $1 million since 2014. And so in addition to what's been going on with the small grants program, on occasion we look for efficiencies and try to save money where we can. And so last year, one of the #1 project was work that Mike Eggleton was doing out of University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. We already had a grant with him doing similar work. So it seemed to be more efficient for us to amend that grant and directly fund $54,000 to attach that work instead of running it through the small grants program and paying the overhead. And everybody was in agreement that that was the most efficient way to use the funds. So we've added that. And then in the end of this month, we're going down to Venice, Florida. We're going to be looking for arapaia. And so we funded a BioBlitz for looking for the arapaia that have recently been escaped. You may have seen some reports of some of those fish being found. And then we had a little bit of extra money. And so the Frost Museum had a proposal for about, I can't remember, it's like $20,000 to get a trailer and outfit it with all kinds of gear so they could do an early detection rapid response. Well, we didn't have enough money to do that, but we did find enough money to buy the trailer and wrap it in the artwork. So those have been an addition. So when you add all of that together, we're at $1.18 million since 2014 that we've spent doing this work. So the scope of work that we're looking at, there's risks, then we're assessing introduction, which is rapid response, the detection projects that we've done, the impacts of invasive carp and other hybridization issues, the hydrilla effects on waterfowl from the cyanobacteria. You'll hear us talk about that. And then controls. There was a really interesting paper that I started as a cancer research project at, I can't remember which, Texas, I want to say Texas A&M, but I don't think that's right. But anyway, they figured out that if you collected the giant salvinia and basically put it in the bassomatic and squeezed the juice out and then sprayed it back on the giant salvinia, it killed just the giant salvinia and nothing else. So I'm hoping that somebody can get a hold of Dow Chemical and make that a real thing so that we can do that for other types of projects. So, and then we worked on lionfish control and then apple snail control. So we've leveraged as much funding as we can with USGS and others. These are some of the benefits. Our National Wildlife Refuge System is very interested on one of the projects that we're funding this year, looking at alligator weed and using a new biocontrol for that. And then we've got additional funds that we've moved over for looking at eDNA for invasive crayfish and then all the snakehead species issues. And we're just continuing to expand our collaboration with anybody and anybody who's willing to help us combat this ever-increasing threat to our native aquatic resources and habitats. So a paper just came out right before as I was putting this together, and it talked about the costs of prevention versus the costs of response. And there's generally about an 11-year lag time from detection to where something actually gets done to start dealing with something. And it's way more expensive to go in after the fact and try to control or eradicate or contain or remove or just manage than it is to prevent. So we're focusing, the Fish and Wildlife Service is really pushing this early detection rapid response program that we're trying to get a nationally coordinated effort. And we can't do this alone. We're going to be reliant upon all of our state partners and any other partner that is willing to work with us on this stuff. So that's really going to be a big push to get all of that through. And then what else I want to make? So there's 200, I didn't know this until I read the study, there's 208 countries, and out of the 208 countries, 204, only 83 countries are actually spending money on invasive species, but most of them just don't track it or report it. At least that's the thought. But most of the money is spent in North America, and then the rest is spent out in the oceans, which makes sense. But it's, invasion, animals and plants and pathogens, nothing respects boundaries. So that's the bigger issue. And then, so this is the paper that the title of it was Research Summary of the Cost of Inaction, Global Invasive Species Spending Reveals a Lack of Proactive Management. And if we can share that link if anybody wants to read the entire paper. But basically, we just need to do a lot more work and find a lot more money to do this. And the invasive carp issue has really captured the attention of Congress, and so that's a whole different program. But the small grants has been a tremendous help for taking small bites out of that elephant or the apple, whichever way you want to look at it, and trying to control and get these things under control. So that's really all I have. And if anybody has any questions, or we can talk later. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I do have a question. I guess it's more of a comment, but I mean, obviously the prevention is the most cost-effective thing. I mean, you pointed that out. I guess most of the proposals that were funded in the small grants, are these mostly on the managing an issue? I mean, it's probably easier to throw money at something that is obviously an issue, and if there's always an issue, we need to put money on it. But then there's the prevention side of it. Is there any way that, is there any grant funding that's separated and say this is only for prevention versus, trying to compete with someone who's already managing a problem?
That's kind of how the ranking system works. Okay. So we're looking at those 4 objectives in the strategic plan, and they're different weights. And so prevention gets, a lot. That's where the risk screening comes in. That's where all that other stuff comes in. But we are kind of at the mercy of what gets submitted for a request. And so we're doing the best that we can to rank those as fairly and as evenly as we can. The agency is putting a lot of effort toward the prevention aspect. The mothball issue was quite large, and so now that we've worked out some things with APHIS, and so most of the imported inspections either go to JFK, where we have a team of inspectors, or LAX. Those are the 2 places where they're really getting thoroughly inspected, and we're still catching things, but we're still missing stuff too. So we're doing the best that we can, and Allan may be able to say more about some of that. And
yeah, just a couple of things. I think probably in the last 5 or 6, 7 years, prevention has really come to the forefront. Because as Cindy said, it's much easier to prevent something than to try and fight something that gets established, and that's what we seem to do. And we are, I think, going to put more emphasis on prevention in our small grants program. That being said, there's limited amounts of money in the small grants program, and so I think generally we're tackling things that are barely established or getting established, and in some cases are already established, and trying to do some kind of management and control. I think that, as Cindy said, with the big carp issue, Congress is starting to take notice on some of these things. The mothball issue had a lot of congressional interest on how some of these species are being imported into the United States. So I think it's just getting that awareness out there that it's it's expensive, but it's cheaper in the long run to get them on the front end. And I think that's where a lot of emphasis will be in the future.
We recently completed a couple of horizon scans, one for the southeast on just plants, and then GS has done some more horizon scanning stuff, and we've done a third one in Puerto Rico.
That's good.
Yeah, okay, so that's the horizon scan is trying to look at what's going to be the next threat coming in and how can we head it off at the pass before it gets here and gets established.